Okay, before the break, we were kind of doing a quick preview of Git integrations and other software. It's all over the place. Any place we would write code, Git is fully integrated into it, or it should be. If it's not a very good place to write code. But there's other places we saw how we could use it in our own software. And this whole, in order to integrate it in our own software, we just enter those terminal commands. That's what we've been looking at all semester. But sometimes it's nice to have a GUI, have that graphical representation or drag and drop functionality, things like that. So the discussion board this week is to check those things out. Look at some of these things. So I'll just jump in here and I'll use, instead of making something new, I'll just use this one that I, for my prep work over the weekend, because there's nothing, actually this is one we've made in class before. Remember when we did the 3 different hello world, one of them just printing it, one of them using the text to speech, and one of them doing emojis. The modern ways of doing hello world. I just threw that together for the practice work. So, and I put together a bunch of branches. So instead of spending tons of time creating them, I'm just going to open that, or you might have some. And you probably have a repository on your computer that you could open up just to look at buttons. And that's what your assignment is this week. So notice that right now there's nothing showing down here that it shows that Git icon. But when we click on any of those files, we get those. There's some other buttons too. So yeah, I'll just do the right click. So I come over to the folder and I right click. The file buttons we would expect for the text editor, but then we have open the repository and folder history buttons here. So if we open the repository, we can see the whole repository. So this is Sublime Merge, sort of sister software to Sublime Text. They're intended to go together. Made by the same editors, they have the same license, so it's free forever for whatever purposes you want to use, but it's not very expensive. So you can, there's also a purchase one, and if you buy both of them, you get a discount. If you buy just Sublime Text or just Sublime Merge, they're the same price, but if you buy both of them together, there's a discount on them. And if you already have one, you get the same discount for buying the second one. You don't have to pay full price for the second one. But again, that's an itemized deduction for software developers. So if you're going to write it off on your taxes, you might want to go ahead and pay full price for the second one and take that. It's not very expensive software, so but take a few more dollars, write off a few more dollars off as an itemized deduction on your taxes when you're making really good software development. So I guess the folder history here is the entire repository because there's only one folder. Have things nicely organized. So if I make a couple clicks here, so if I click some random one, looks like this is where I added the commit, where I added the talk to the text to speech. And go here, we can see what files were edited, have some sort of graphical representation. Lots of different options. This particular one just opened the whole repository, so I'm going to close that. Maybe instead of a file, we've got emoji one here. I right click on that, notice that under the Git repository, it says folder history. There's a button to see the file history or the folder history that it's part of. This only has one folder in it, so folder one's kind of boring. But if we look at file history, then that kind of isolates this file out uniquely. And notice up here, it added in this command. So if you want to, you could type this command explicitly here or so. We can see every commit that it changed on, and it's restricted to just this one file. The other branches still show our general navigation shows we can jump to other things. But this command's there. Close that out. We can also see a particular line. If I close that out, go back over here. Maybe I just want to know where this line changed. Actually, let me go into read. README has several lines for that purpose. Maybe I just want to know where one of these two lines changed. So I highlight those lines and right click, get a line history. So we can, through Sublime Merge, we can narrow down, actually through all of them, we can narrow down to just like a single line. It's kind of hard to do that in a terminal, but in our GUI applications, it's a little bit easier to get to. The other two big ones we're going to look at this week would have the same functionality. And notice how instructions are looking at this file, filtering it down to just this file, and then filtering it down to just those 3 lines. So we can see every commit where those were changed, lines added, taken away, lines added, and really dig down and see just the part we're looking at in a nicely formatted situation. Somebody took a lot of time to come up with a front end that would make it easy to track down all those changes and stuff. I'm gonna hit Control-Shift-W to change that. The other button there, you know, there's also blame. This works a lot better. This one's a mess in the terminal. I think we saw it once. Obviously, I'm to blame for everything in that file. This is for my prep work the other day. But we get color coding on the branches, so you can see what changes were made on which commits. And when you're part of a big team, or part of a small team, or sometimes even if it's just yourself and the project's been going on for a long time, you want to see when you did a certain thing, it's nice to be able to focus on just those changes. Like this was added on this commit, who made the commit when you're part of a large team, and notice there's more information in the hover. And then this commit Sunday, July 9th. Okay, yeah, I guess I did the purple Sunday morning. And we have that graphical, all that graphical representation, all of our different branches. I come over here and double click on a branch, notice that that branch history changes depending on which one we're looking at. These were mostly all merged back together. The stashes, we can see here, if we click on that, we can see what's in the stash itself. Hunk history kind of abbreviates that a little bit further. So yeah, you can see what's up there in the command line. So filter just that file, just those lines, and when it was changed. And that can be a useful button when it's not random examples. It's kind of hard to see the usefulness in random examples. But on some legitimate things you have, try that home history button. You have a similar thing in GitHub. We'll look at that in a few minutes. Lots of functionality. You just want to click around. Next we have buttons for stash. This is one thing I like about the Sublime Merge is notice in that hover thing that popped up, it actually says what terminal command it's running. That can be really, really useful because something you find yourself doing a lot, or if you need to do it in a terminal instead, go back to a terminal for some reason and do it there. You can see the commands there. All our different options for stash, which that menu is like Sublime. So if we hit Control-Shift-P, we get back to that the command menu, command palette, that's what they call it. I would never enter commands that way, but if you're the type of person that likes to enter commands, a lot of people really like that functionality in Sublime Text. Is there anything in here with lots of changes? All these commits look like they only have one change. All of the files do show up over here. So notice that we can read, there's the view of the file as well. And is it here? Yeah, under more options, there's open and editor will open it up in Sublime Text. Probably no surprises there. File history playing. We get over here, we have options to avoid it to earlier versions. Lots of things, but obviously a click around thing, kind of compare them. I'll leave that one open. A really nice one is this one, Get Cracking. They have an awesome logo, the little octopus logo. Let's see. I'm going to start down in the bottom right hand corner instead of the top left like normal. And notice that it gives us options of which major online repository systems we want to use. Are we going to work with GitHub or GitLab, Bitbucket or Jira? The 4 biggest ones right now. And that list does seem to be dynamic. So if something else suddenly shoots up in popularity, we'll see it there. We can join into other ones. This one's not free, and definitely get what you pay for situation on this. I open the repo. So we can open the repo, and this third one over here is really, really nice too. I'll start with I'll open that same repository I did earlier today when I installed it. Actually, that was like 5:45. It's like 15 minutes before class. It's like, oh yeah, I meant to install that before class. So I just installed it and opened this up real quick. So look across the top, you'll see buttons that you probably should recognize the names on. We have stuff in the stage, so we have a pop button. No changes have been made on the latest repository. And notice this one's going left to right instead of top to bottom. So as it gets longer, we get scroll wheels, some really nice icons, traveling. This is a really, really nice one. You're going to spend some time clicking around on this. All the local branches. There's not a remote one here. There's something I can add remote. I guess I can do that in Sublime too. So I open the repository and I don't get something here. I was doing this over the weekend. So anybody help me for like a game dev class and saw my starter characters, the Python script for running in Blender. It's also a Blender plugin, but in all the class examples, I always pulled the script, the human script out separately. I finally got around to adding clothes to that starter file and genders. So there's like a man and woman, and they're fully clothed now for the starter files on the human video game models. I did that over the weekend, but we have the remote connection as well as the local connection, all that information. We would have that in Sublime as well. I guess it does look a little bit different there, so I should probably open that up. This one. Open and merge. Oh, that's the wrong thing altogether. Close that. Oh, smurge the kernel. There we go. So we've got the remote connection over there. There's not a lot of different branches. I collapse all the branches on the Blender plugin, so that one's something that would be useful. Going to play around on Get Kraken has really nice graphics on them. You see the different branching, things like that. Yeah, definitely one to click around on and get used to. This new terminal well, they call it a terminal post experience. So it's kind of the same thing when we open this. Notice we get a terminal. So if I navigate to a repository, documents / delete / get tested was my random name for that over the weekend. Once we're in a repository, then right next to the terminal, we get all of that Git Kraken stuff. So it gives us a terminal to work in, which will give the default terminal for your system. I'm on PowerShell, so if you're on a Mac, you can see the terminal. If you swap it around to the Git Bash, is the default terminal that you open, then you would see that here. But whatever your default terminal is, it should connect to it. And obviously there's ways to just choose which terminal we want to use if you have more than one on your system. And then we can do the terminal commands and have all of the Git Bash stuff. But you'll notice there's a few less buttons there. It replaced the toolbar ribbon full of buttons with a terminal so we can type those commands in directly. That's the really nice functionality there. This was really, really nice. These people also make several VS Code plugins. So there's a good chance that whatever VS Code plugin you're using was made by them. You might already be using one of their plugins. Search Console free. It's not a free for any use. It's free for personal usage, but it is not free for commercial usage. So if you're using one of their plugins in VS Code, make sure you check the README before you go and make money off any project that you used it on. GitLens, that's the one they're promoting this day. So if you use the GitLens plugin for your VS Code integration, that would be Git Kraken. That's not the only one they made. It's the 30-day free trial for clients. I didn't realize this at first. I thought that like some of the functionality was going to go away after 30 days, but after 30 days, still had the full functionality. Did they say it somewhere on here? You can. It's just for personal usage. If you're using you can use the free version for yourself, as long as, but not on a private repository. So if you're like an open source contributor, as long as you're working with a public repository, you can use their version's fine to use. Public, as long as it's public and like you're an open source contributor, that's their contribution to open source stuff is they waive the commercial fee for that. But like you saw, really nice graphics, lots and lots of tools in there. Do I have Tower? Did I install Tower? I don't think I installed Tower. No, I did not. The other one that I recommended was Tower. I just searched for Tower Git. This is a really, really nice one. Again, free download. Here's a little video. A little video here. It has drag and drop functionality, so you can do your merging and conflict handling with really, really nice animations. That's a really nice one. And yeah, y'all can click around on that. So studying that part is definitely just clicking around on things. Install some of those softwares, click around, see what you think about it, go in the discussion board, and debate with your classmates why you think one is better than another or something. It seemed like a good discussion topic. As far as lectures, it's not, I could click the buttons, but the point is to click on the GUIs, so definitely something to click on. I mentioned a couple. I use Sublime. I like Sublime Mode because Sublime Text is my full text editor. Get Kraken. I really want to get Kraken, but Get Power has some amazing functionality, and those are not the only ones there. Make sure you check that Git GUI that came with your installation of Git, and if you use Spider IDE for Python, they just integrate. They just use the Git GUI to integrate right into that. But you all know the process. Go search for GUI software for Git. Oh, they have a list right on Git SCM. They apparently have a list. That's probably a good one to start with. So for whichever program, GitHub Desktop is essentially what everybody's seen GitHub before. What is different about GitHub and your local computer? It's a distributed system, so they're both considered clients. Neither one's considered a server. It just happens to be running on a server. But if you wanted to use your local machine for that, just download GitHub Desktop. So that server that we think of as GitHub, that has the web page and everything, it just happens to be running GitHub Desktop. If you want to use your local computer for that, just run that software, and then you have GitHub as, and then your computer becomes that central, semi-centralized thing, if we think of it like that. It's technically still distributed, but if we're putting stuff on GitHub, it really seems like a centralized system. So just a technicality. Source tree's been around for a while. You might recognize the late 1990s, early 2000s interface on that one. Georgia's Kid, I've never used that, but it's free. And glancing at it, it looks like it's not going to get overwhelming. Sometimes nice graphics can be useful, but while you're looking at it, keep looking at some of these. Keep in mind that if you're, say, the Git ops person on a huge team, you're going to spend your entire working day staring at that application, right? You get to the office at 8 o'clock, and from 8 to noon, when you head out to lunch, you're going to be staring at what your team's been doing on the repository and that software. And then when you get back from lunch, from like 1 to 4 o'clock again, you're staring at that application. So keep stuff like that in mind as you evaluate. Does it have really nice graphics? But how do you think those graphics are going to apply when you stare at them for a 40-hour week straight? Git extensions, I started trying that. For some reason, I didn't get very far into trying that one. Git Kraken's awesome. Sublime Merge right near the top. I've never used Git, but you can see a lot of different ones on here. I've heard really good things about Fork. I've never used it because you can see the price there. But if you're an Apple user, you're probably used to paying for software. And a lot of times, things that you would get from the Apple Store, especially since they have that strict criteria to go on the Apple Store, definitely a get what you pay for situation. And I've heard really good things about Fork. Y'all can click around and try different ones. Ungit, you can see that right there. It's a nice simplified, a very simplified GUI. I knew that was going to be on the list somewhere. So just staring there at it for a full work day straight, a very simple GUI with large icons is kind of nice to stare at for a whole day straight. But you can see, without even going any place to the official Git page, gitscm.com, there is a huge list of those things to try out. So try out a few, and then in the discussion board, talk to your classmates, convince your classmates to use one, or debate an issue. If one of your classmates says they thought one was great and you didn't like that particular one, start up the conversation. Two other things I wanted to look at real quick here. While Spider all spins up, I'll go over to GitHub and look at this. So I did this over the weekend, and I don't know why I didn't even think about it. So the thing I was just mentioned, it's I finally added clothes to my fellow characters. They were part of a larger package. A Blender plugin has a bunch of animals and one of the starter shapes. So no details are there, but the meshes are set up correctly, like where the eyes are going to go, where the cheekbones are going to be, even if it's a if there's currently no details there, everything's set up proportioned correctly. I spent a lot of time researching different things, animal sizes, different size things. Learned a lot about animals. Like, did y'all know that on iguanas, those spines on their back are unique? The little spikes on the back on an iguana's back are as unique as a fingerprint. I guess that's the iguana's fingerprint. It's the unique identifier. Learning things like that, the different proportion difference between a Siberian tiger and a Malaysian tiger, and set up all the proportions correctly for starter files. But then all an artist has to do is sit down and add the details, and the artist doesn't have to spend hours doing that. But a couple of some human characters, and those definitely got used most often in game development. So I pulled those out to become their own. And I decided to go just a video user manual, because I've been typing all day and I didn't feel like typing the user manual. It's like, oh, I'll just go with video. And when I put that in there, it occurred to me that I don't think we've talked about how to put videos here, because you can't just put it in like a normal thing. So what I do to get videos on here, you have to do something tricky. Like the README on GitHub would show HTML, so you can use like the HTML video tag. Well, where do you store the video? And it becomes a little bit tricky like that. But what I do for videos and pictures is on issues, the thing that's intended to be for bug reports. Obviously, a bug report might need videos and pictures. So issues is set up for that. So if we just create an issue, I'll go in here. So what I did is I took the video file, and if I edit this, I just drug the video file over, and when it goes in here, GitHub automatically generates the address of where GitHub is keeping it, and then just copy and paste that into your thing. So I'll do it on a different one. So if I go to I'll go to that document thing when you all were fixing stuff. It looked like everybody picked the same two things to fix. Everybody fixed the Python code and the README. But if we go to issues and create a new issue, do I have a picture anywhere? I don't know if I have any pictures here. Yeah, I don't think I have any pictures here. Let me just take a screenshot. So if I just take a real quick screenshot, now I'll have at least that picture. Pictures and screenshots, just grab that and drag it over to issues, because pictures can be very important in bug reports. Same thing with videos. And for storing it, GitHub generates the spot where it kept it. So I'm just going to copy that, highlight it, hit Control copy. Picture issue. And since it needs to keep that picture around for the thing, I can now come over and just paste that right in the README. Edit. And paste that in there. And when we save those changes, Okay, so that probably wasn't the best picture. I might have could have gone with something other than a picture of GitHub to see on GitHub. Sorry, I wasn't thinking very far in advance on that one. But that's what I do to get pictures into the README on GitHub. I was doing that with the video over the weekend, and it occurred to me that I couldn't remember if I'd done that in class or not. Let me close this project. So the other thing that was on my notes was actually something trailing from last week. So open project, and where did I save that? Oh, let me delete. Oh yeah, for class, don't delete yet. Documenting, that's it. So I'm going to open this project. I went ahead and wrote a bunch of code, a bunch of Python code. So a payroll thing, have employee records, and then I have a next field to make this a linked list instead of using the built-in list in Python. The general catch-all, general purpose list that comes in Python has to be ready for any situation we throw at it. So there's a lot of overhead that comes with that. In order to make a list, every element in that list just has a pointer at the next element. So it's really just one small data field to make that list. So I did that. Also made it a tree for those who have seen data structures, but you probably saw the classroom example data structures where it looks like we're recreating the list that exists in Python. Normally they would show up somewhere like this. Our employee object just happens to have a field that says next. And then we have push and pop methods built right in the class. So the pop, we push a bunch of things onto the stack, and then when we pop things off the stack, it runs the payroll calculator. So yeah, an overcomplicated payroll calculator, but I'm assuming that if you all saw data structures in a class, you probably saw the super stripped down ones, and it didn't make any sense why we would make those. Typically, we would just take those data fields and throw them in an object like this. There's nothing too fancy here. One that adds hours into a CSV file to serve as a database for now, and another one that adds some vacation requests in, so that when we run this, so that stack goes through processing from that CSV file as a stack, so it's super quick and efficient. A stack is the way that a computer naturally wants to do things, so it works really, really well with a computer. So it goes through and then returns everybody's name and how much and the gross pay as a bunch of tuples. And then it returns time off. It organizes them into a binary search tree, so that it puts in order, and then that would be used somewhere. But what the code does isn't really what we were looking for here. I just wanted to talk about it for a second. I spent a lot of time building a little bit extra here because, like I just said, if you all saw data structures in a classroom, you probably saw the super stripped down ones where when you see the linked list example, it's you make an empty list and then you don't really do anything with it. And it looks like you're trying to recreate functionality that already exists in Python, which is not how we would actually use a linked list if we were going to create it ourselves. We just add that field. So to make employee a linked list, that's the next thing. And then to turn that into a stack or queue is just the way that we go through it. And we don't keep it in memory. We pull it out of RAM when we're done. So we're not being wasteful with our resources. And then to turn something into a binary search tree is just those two data fields. And then we insert them in that specific order. Smaller things to the left, bigger things to the right, and build up a tree that way. I would actually use data structure. I'm going to take a moment and talk about that because I assume y'all saw generic examples. What I actually wanted to talk about is, okay, this project's finished now, so we need some documentation to tell people how to use it. And we could go write up the user manual somewhere that would make it look really nice, put together a web page. Probably want the user manual to be on a web page these days. And typically, that's what comments are used for. I don't know who all you all would have had for other programming courses. But I don't ever follow comments because a lot of teachers and classrooms will make a big deal about putting comments everywhere. But that's not how, but not in the way that we would actually use comments in the real world. If we're going to use comments, we want to do something like make a web page from our comments. So we can do that with doc strings here. In Spider, I was
going to say, doesn't triple quote automatically generate in Python? It doesn't seem to there on yours, but I know on some IDEs, when you do the triple quote, it automatically grabs all your variables similar to the way Java does.
It does here. Document. It was where I was entering that. So that's not part of Python. That's part of the IDE.
Okay.
So it generates the doctrine. The 3 quotes themselves in Python, all that does is create that creates a string that can include line breaks. So it's not really a comment. That is, if you put a lot of these in your code, it will start to slow things down because comments are ignored. But this is an actual string. So it's going to load into RAM, but we're not doing anything with it. It's just going to load into RAM and then garbage collection is going to pull it right back out of RAM. So I was going to put one up here as well for the whole class, but that doesn't automatically generate like the thing. So I'll just put it on the class here. We don't need, I'll put the summary up here. There's different ways. Those are for generating web pages. So I just put in the 3 quote marks and hit generate doc string. And this is, what do we got here? Parameters on the part. So first we have all the parameters that are being passed in, and then what it returns, which in this case is none. And each one gets a type and a description, and then up here is sort of a blank space. So the blank space, we give a general summary of it. The constructor for this class. Name, it's going to be string data, the employee's name. Rate is floating point data. How much the employee makes per hour. So yes, so generate those list names, and most IDEs should do that. If your IDE does not do that inside of the methods, it won't necessarily happen everywhere, but if you go to where the method starts and then enter 3 quotes on the next line before you the actual code for that function or method, if it doesn't automatically generate something along these lines, you probably want to use a different IDE. It's not prepared to work with Python. But this is what we would actually do with comments. Instead of that stuff that's typically required in a classroom. Hours, I guess would be a floating point number again. How many hours the employee worked. And this part, the IDE, no IDE can do this part. So then we give a description on each one. Next is of type employee. And description on it. I want the word description there. This is a different syntax. I usually use Google syntax and it generated a NumPy syntax for me. I think I do want the word description there. Well, I don't. So don't need a description. That's just saying, put the description here. Takes employee type of data, and the description is turns these objects into a linked list, and then makes them a stack. So a linked list turns them into a collection, and then a stack is sort of how we process, how we go through them. And I'll skip ahead. There's no return on this one, or something that returns. This one has a return. So to add that down here, again, generate docstring. Parameters, the head is the bottom, the base of the list. It's going to be type employee, and this is the base element in the stack. So like a stack of plates, this would be the plate at the very bottom of that stack, the one that everything else is stacked on top of. So the last thing we get to, the last one to be processed. And then returns, notice this returns a couple methods, but in like our C family of languages, it will automatically put in the type and stuff because it'll know what that is. The type is going to be a tuple. So notice that it identified the recursive call. So it identified where this method calls itself. Whoops. I didn't mean to open the help on that because and notice when we do this, that thing I just typed in here is what shows up in the help menu. So this is the documentation as far as what the automatic help menus in your code would pull from. This is the type of code you would want to add. So and notice the recursive call and only looked at the other return that brought back a tuple with the name, which would be a string, and description, the employee's name, and the results of the get paid function, which, where's the get paid function? Oh yeah, so the get paid function, which returns a floating point number, the gross pay for the pay period. Hopefully that's enough to see the gist of it. We add that to all of our methods, and well, we can already see when I accidentally double click on the pop method, or in I go somewhere else, like if I go to the file window, Control I will open that up, and you can see that this is where it's pulling that help menu from. So keep that in mind when you're writing libraries that other people would use, or Python modules that other people would use. Same thing, we just call them different things depending on what language we're working in. In Java, if you're writing packages that other people would use, keep in mind that it's something that will show up in your IDE or hover text. So it's written right below this because I happen to be written here, but notice the hover text on that one in Spider is the information I just typed in there. So it's what you would want to tell other programmers about the documentation. But we probably want that going on the website, right? We saw on GitHub. Did I already delete the one that I did last week? Let me go to my account, this button. And on the repositories, it's in most recently used, class record. So we saw last week when we were looking at pages, and that's why I asked about this, we have this folder docs that is the web page connected to our repository, where we want to put actual official documentation on our code. So to generate that, we need something to read through all these doc string comments. I guess I should put a summary here. So summary is the method to process as a stack. There we go. So we got the summary, then the word parameters, underline. Notice it has the same number of dashes as characters. Returns, and things underlined, same number of dashes underneath it. That's kind of important what we're gonna do. And then we can do the other ones. Let me do at least one over here. So this one, method to request timeout. Oh, another method to enter weekly hours. So in a realistic situation, this would be tied into the button the employee clicks every day for clock in and clock out buttons. We would just keep track of that and tie it into that method. Maybe something short over here, same thing. So in the doc string, function to request time off. Other things that we would have in a payroll calculator than the quick examples we normally see. So now we're gonna, everything's saved. So I'm gonna open a terminal in this location. Is there a button for that? Oh, the absolute path, that'll work. I'll go over to PowerShell and change directory into that location. Whoops, change directory, there's spaces in there, so. Cancel that, let me try that again. Change directory and there's spaces in it, so inside are quote marks. There we go, so now we're in that project. This is how we can see all those things. We have that all our project files, and I'm going to use one for pip install pdoc3. This is the one I like. It knows there were notations, NumPy notation, the ones probably generated there. There's also a Google notation. Those are probably the two most popular. pdoc1 is from years back, and it only gets like halfway there. And at some point, somebody worked off of that and started making some really nice improvements, and then they suddenly stopped. So if somebody's doing a whole lot of work and suddenly stops, it kind of gives an indication of what happens. I don't know the exact story, but then a large team of people got together and took those improvements that were pdoc2 and finished them out. So I suspect something happened to the person that was doing pdoc2, and all his friends got together and finished that project afterwards. I don't know what happened, but make sure you install pdoc3, which is already on my machine. But once that's on there, we say pdoc, we're in this folder, so pdoc. Yeah, if I just write that, we'll pull up the instructions. So --HTML or --PDF. So if you want a website or a PDF documentation, -O is the directory it goes into. Those are the two that you really need. So pdoc dot for the current directory, --HTML, and -O for docs. Put it in a folder called docs. So when I run that, oops, I did that backwards. Someone level 2 high or something. Either way, oops, first I can delete. And this one in document string, here's that folder docs. And then that's what we'll do. So it took our project name and created all the websites. You can see the Google icon there, and put them in a folder with the same name as the project. Employee, index, time card. So we only made 3 classes, but it put the index page there too, so I'll open that. It's always going to generate this exact same thing with the same names and everything. So the first time you go through and do it, you might want to go ahead and, or at some point, maybe everybody here's knows what so maybe look over at the source code and get some of the names of the elements that are used, or look at this style sheet so that you can make changes to the style sheet and stuff. Very basic, but we created something like this. See all of our employee classes. There's those sentences that were put in. Notice the parameters and returns were underlined, but set those up. It set up how those would be styled. So a lot of those characters, just like our code, comments are just, we ignore lines of text we ignore, so we can run the Python code. There's nothing that stops us from ignoring the Python code and only looking at comments. So this is how comments would actually be used. So that's why I never require them in class. I know some teachers make a big deal out of them and have you do stuff that is not the way we would actually use comments in the industry. We would do stuff like this. And this is how you get your, generate your website. Or notice here, that was set up for a different notation. It had the default template in Slider. Is kind of why I was expecting it to generate Google notation instead of NumPy notation. It didn't recognize those annotations. So probably wanted to change those in the code. I'm going to delete that folder too. So I'm going to go back out here and I will delete that. And these annotation ones are from like clearly a different notation. So I'm going to make the keywords match the notation down here. Pascal case, then a line with as many dashes as there are characters, and then indent the value that goes in there. I guess the indenting is optional, just makes it easier to read. Then instead of description, with many dashes up here, a payroll calculator. This is gross pay as a stack and time off as a binary search tree. Save that so that we have that general description. Should probably put that on all the pages. Obviously, there's a way to do that on the overall one, so that it just automatically applies to all of them. Paste that in there. Save all. And now if I'm going to do that again, this time I'm just going to do pdoc. Remember, install pdoc free. One did some bare minimum. It was something somebody created for their own needs, and then they did other stuff afterwards. Somebody forked off that for pdoc 2, and for whatever reason, the person working that was making something great, and then left it unfinished, and then a large group of people got together and turned that pdoc 2 into pdoc 3, which is the finished version pdoc 2 is supposed to be. So I'm just going to say pdoc doc, and we do have to say whether it's HTML or PDF. That's the minimum right there. pdoc, the current directory, the current file, a subset of things, whatever files you want to in your project, you want to actually document, which I just said all of them. So when we go over here, it creates a folder called HTML. So all I did earlier is change that name from HTML, the generic one, to docstring, and we still have all this information. Each particular one's on the time card. Notice now Notice what happened in the author gave some highlighting right after that line. Starting to set up the myself, and I think y'all have probably seen CSS, so you know what to do with it. It tried to recognize keywords, so as and all and those are keywords in Python, so it showed those. But notice it didn't do a line break. So whenever you do that, I'm going to delete that and come back over here. You probably want to put some line breaks in there. Manually put the line breaks in so they show up on the web page. I guess this should be the description of each particular one. And this is something we have in all of our languages. So you would also probably want to do some namespace, change some stuff up here. Which that is just a file, a folder that a file with the .py extension and the same name as the project and no Python code. All it has in it is one doc string that has a summary of the overall project to get that. And then we can jump into all these, see that description, and I always change the styling up a little bit. I have another script that reads through there and pulls the style tag out of what is generated, and then another style, a CSS sheet that I put on this automatically for my stuff with the style I like. A really easy thing to do, but change up the style a little, and you get all the links filled in, and that is something we have in every one of our languages. That's what should really go in that docs folder on Google Docs. All the official documentation stuff. Really, really easy to use. And you saw that basically, if you're in a decent IDE for writing Python, you just start out your doc string, which is just a string. It's not a comment, it's a string, so it does actually load into RAM. If you have lots and lots of those, you will, it's going to start to slow things down. So if you have a lot of things to document that way, it's a good idea to do it on a copy of the project. Right, when you get the finished project, make a copy and add all those doc strings in there because they're actual strings. They load into RAM, they use up resources. They're not ignored like comments. I use Doxygen more often because it uses actual comments that don't slow things down. But you don't know how to make alternate versions of a project. That's what this whole class has been about. There wasn't very many positive responses when I asked about that last week. So I thought I want to do a quick pass at that. All of our programming languages have that. Is Doxygen working again? For years, one that I didn't really like is Doxygen. Their site has not been working lately, though. For some reason, they misplaced their secure certificate a few months ago, or they misplaced their SSL, or maybe they moved to something different. I didn't look very hard, but it knows lots and lots of languages. It was one originally created for C++, probably 30 years ago, and it knows how to create web pages documenting pretty much every language that exists, and also allows us to add our own unique forms. So those things exist in pretty much every one of our programming languages. Those are useful comments. Those are comments we would actually use in the real world instead of what something the teachers might have required in the classroom. Something that does something. It does something. It's not just text that, yeah. Comments don't do anything. They don't have a purpose in our code. So I never make a big deal out of them. I know a lot of people do in classrooms. So I wanted to share that with you. So you see it and you saw that it was pretty much half generated from the IDE. the IDE is not intelligent, so it can't put the summary there. You still have to type the summary anywhere you're doing that, but you'll get a lot of this. You'll have a lot of it formatted already. And there's just a few little custom ones. Do a summary for each class, doing one for the overall project. And then you get an entire website, as well as when somebody else is using that in an IDE, that's the documentation that the IDE is going to show them. And well, like we saw hypertext and help menus and things like that. So a very useful thing. You might want to get some practice doing that because for some reason it's standard in academia to show the incorrect usage of comments. I feel like arbitrary things that don't have any purpose. And some teachers make a really big deal out of it. But documentation generation is how we would actually use comments in the industry. And you all are all getting close to graduation, so you should probably see the actual usage of them, not the classroom usage of them. The big thing this week, though, is those GUI packages for Git. Take a look at them. Look at several, and it's a discussion board topic, so hopefully I'm hoping it'll be a good discussion board. Might also be useful for your all's projects, if you have different ones to work with there. Some of them are highly animated, really nice graphics. Some of them are stripped down, a wide variety of them. Check them out and start posting that discussion board sooner rather than later, please. A lot of people like to wait to the last minute. We only have the introduction discussion board and happen in week 1, so everybody's always excited and gets that turned in immediately. I do take there's 2 dates on the discussion board, and I do take points off if you don't make it on the post by date. So there's the post by date and then the actual submission where the discussion board closes and you can't make replies or anything anymore. So make sure you get it turned in by whatever the post, your initial post up there soon. But hopefully, you all will find this one interesting and it'll lead to a good discussion, so we can be a bunch of replies all week. Otherwise, does anybody have any questions about the stuff from this evening?
Yeah, I just have a question on the M6 group assignment.
Yes.
So I mentioned, like in the first part, to have like a fast forward merge, and for that one, I didn't have any problem. For the second part, I was just confused. Do we need to have a branch where we have some changes and then another person in our group repository have changes in the same file that merges into that branch, so there is a conflict and then we handle it in a group? Or is it like a one-person assignment, we each do it?
I would accept it either way. I was thinking of it as a group, so
Okay.
that was my initial thought, Mateo, what you said at first, where each one of you all, you pick a file. I was going to pull up those instructions because I hadn't read them in a moment, but I remember which one you're talking about. My original thought was what you were thinking. So we have the main branch. Pick a file. So I think there's 3 people in your group. So then you would each create your own branch and make different changes in that file, so that when you merge them back together, you get conflicts.
And should we do 3 people do the merge, or is it like one person merge and then the other person merges in, or 3 together? I've never tried a conflict with 3 people.
You'd have to do 2. You'd have to merge the first 2 and then bring in the second.
Okay, right, okay. Yeah, because I never tried before. I was like, oh, okay.
And then bring in the second one into the result of the first 2.
All right, perfect. Yeah, I just wanted to ask because I was a little, I was confused by how it was worded. So perfect. Okay, yeah, we can do that in a group.
Yeah, I rewrite those because I put the stuff together in a hurry, and sometimes the instructions aren't clear as saying. Like I have a picture in my mind. So yeah, I was thinking what you said at first, where you each do a different branch, and then merge them back together. But if you want to do it that second way, where you each resolve the conflict differently, I would accept that as well.
Okay.
Whatever you think would be the best practice for your group.
I'm sure we can organize with Nathan and Samantha something out.
But yeah,
Yeah.
first was what I had in mind with that. Sorry about the ambiguity. I will clear up. I'm going to clear up these instructions.
All right. Thank you so much.
That one might be a group assignment, so there might only be one. Most of the group ones I put as a group assignment, so it's only one submission for the group.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll check it once we do it. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I don't have any questions.
Okay. I thought you were coming to ask a question for a second there. So that would be
Well, I was eating dinner.
So I will see you all on Thursday. Give some of those GUI applications a try. You saw how many are out there. There's a huge list just of official ones on Get SDM site. So give some of them a try. Hopefully you'll like them. Otherwise, I'll see you Thursday. Have a good one.
Have a good night.
Thank you.